What if Jett was a controller instead of Duelist? Today, I completely redesigned her entire kit and somehow turned Jett into the most unique controller. For Jett's signature ability, I wanted to keep her iconic smoke mechanic, but instead of using it like a quick Duelist escape tool, I transform it into a true controller smoke. When Jett equips the smoke, you can now actively control it before deploying it, kinda like her current smoke mechanic. You would see the wind trail moving through the air while aiming it around corners and through choke points. But now, the smoke doesn't instantly appear when it touches the surface. Instead, the smoke only forms when you release left click and you can control it as long as you want, no time limit. Which means Jett players can precise the guide where they want the smoke to travel before finally activating it. And the moment it activates, everything inside the smoke changes, because any enemy standing inside the smoke becomes airborne. Not super high into the air, but just enough to completely ruin their movement and aim. Now suddenly, the smoke becomes way more than visual denial. If defenders try hiding inside it, their bullet accuracy gets ruined, just like how it is when you jump. They can move on air but slowly, so rushing through the smoke becomes dangerous. And here's the crazy part. The smoke lasts 15 seconds. That's an insanely long duration compared to her current smokes. She gets 2 charge of the ability. And just like a real controller, the ability recharges over time. Now this ability is where the redesign starts getting dangerous, because instead of giving Jett flashes or stuns, I wanted her to weaponize pure wind force. When Jett equips the ability, she channels wind energy in both of her hands, and just like breach stun, you can charge the ability before firing it. The longer you hold it, the farther the wind blast travels. Then once released, Jett unleashes a massive concentrated gust of wind straight forward, and any enemy caught inside the zone gets violently pushed backwards. Not sideways, not lightly nudged, fully pushed backward by the force of the wind. So now imagine defenders trying to hold tight angles on site. Suddenly they get blasted completely out of position. And then I added the important mechanic. If enemies get pushed into a wall, they get stunned. So now the ability becomes terrifying near tight corridors and enclosed spaces. She's reshaping where enemies are allowed to stand. But then I added another mechanic that connects directly into her smokes. If the wind blast touches one of Jett's smokes, the smoke stretches outward and doubles its length for 5 seconds. Visually, it will look insane. The smoke suddenly expands across the map like a giant storm front, being carried by the wind. Now suddenly, Jett can dynamically reshape her own utility during the round. Maybe you originally smoked the doorway, but then extend the smoke deeper into the side during execute. Or maybe you cut off an entire rotation path by expanding the smoke across a corridor. This creates a controller that consistently evolves her utility in real time instead of placing static smokes like Brimstone or Omen. And honestly, coordinated team would probably abuse this ability like crazy. This is probably my favorite ability in the entire redesign because it keeps Jett's aerial identity alive while turning it into crowd control. When Jett equips the ability, she throws a compact spinning Cyclone projectile forward. It lands on the ground and creates a small cyclone zone for a few seconds. At first it looks manageable, but the moment enemies step inside, they start getting lifted upward into the air. Not instantly launched, but slowly dragged outward by the cyclone currents. And because they are floating, their movement becomes extremely limited. Now imagine trying to take a gunfight while your character is literally being pulled into the sky. It would feel incredibly awkward. But then comes the terrifying part. If the cyclone lifts enemies high enough to hit the ceiling, they get stunned on impact. So suddenly this ability becomes map dependent in a really interesting way. On maps with low ceilings, the stun becomes much easier to trigger, which means enemies would constantly have to think about positioning around enclosed areas. And just like her Q ability, this also interacts with her smokes. If the Cyclone zone touches one of Jett's smokes, the height of the smoke doubles for 5 seconds. So instead of normal smokes, Jett can suddenly create these gigantic vertical storms covering huge section of the map. You would literally see towering wind columns stretching outwards through the side. This creates something really unique for Valorant: vertical controller utility. Most controllers only control horizontal space, but Jett controls both horizontal and vertical movement simultaneously. And visually, this will probably be one of the coolest kits in the game. Before we get into Ultimate, if you enjoyed this Valorant redesign videos, subscribe to the channel. Also, you can join to the channel and unlock many cool perks. Now, obviously, Jett's current ultimate is one of the most iconic Duelist ults in Valorant. Flying around with perfect accuracy knives is basically peak Jett gameplay. So I didn't want to completely remove the blade fantasy. Instead, I transformed the knives into area control weapons. When Jett activates the ultimate, she equips a set of massive wind-infused blades. But instead of using them primarily for direct kills, the knives now create storms wherever they land. Jett gets 3 blade charges, and when you throw one, the blade spins into ground before erupting into a huge tornado zone. These tornadoes last 5 seconds each, and honestly, they look terrifying. Massive storms violently spinning across the side, with blades rotating inside wind currents. Any enemy touching the tornado takes continuous damage from the spinning blades trapped inside, but they also get slowed at the same time. So now the ultimate becomes this insane zoning tool. Suddenly, defenders can't comfortably rotate or reposition without walking directly through damaging storms. And because the storms slow enemies too, escaping them becomes difficult. This basically turns Jett into a controller that locks down the battlefield using pure environmental pressure. But here's what makes the ultimate really scary. All of her other abilities combo with it. You can push enemies into the tornado using Gale Break. You can trap them inside giant airborne smokes. You can lift them upward with Cyclone core, while tornado blades shred them below. Everything in her kit starts chaining together. And unlike Duelist Jett, who relies on mechanical aim, this version of Jett relies on controlling enemy movement. She dominates space instead of dominating aim duels, which honestly feels like a really natural evolution of her wind powers. So yeah, that's Jett as a controller. But what do you think? Would this actually work in Valorant, or will it be completely broken? And if you had to redesign Jett into another role, what would you do? Comment your ideas below, subscribe for more Valorant redesign videos, and check out this video where I turned Neon into a healer initiator.